This is Frederick Watts.
This is Gene Watts.
And
this is Love in 60 Seconds.
We have been married for over 20 years.
And in that time, we have learned a few things that we'd like to share with you.
So if you're single, newlyweds, or seasoned in marriage, we think you will enjoy the upcoming program.
Absolutely. And we want you to like, engage, share, and do all of those wonderful things that we do on Instagram, Facebook, and every other social media outlets. Send us DMs. We want to hear from you.
This is
Love
in 60 Seconds.
60 seconds of loving. 60 loving 60 seconds. 60 seconds.
Back, babe, or something, because you're not in this camera.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Frederick and Gene Watts, and we're live on Love in 60 Seconds on both Facebook and Instagram. Hope that you have enjoyed your weekend, and hopefully we got all our bugs worked out, and we think that you guys should be able to hear us. And as always, we love to hear from you, so continue to DM us, continue to navigate and talk with us on Facebook and Instagram and let us know what you're thinking. Tonight we're going to hit a topic that we discussed last week. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, so we're going to cover it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to talk about 7 signs that your relationship may be in trouble. We're going to recap those and then talk a little bit more about some other things that you want to watch for when, watching out for your relationship being in trouble. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, and we're not going to be on long tonight, but we're happy to see everybody, all those that are signing in. Prophet Trumbo, good to see you. And I can't even see who that is without my glasses, but thank you for tuning in to us on Instagram. You can lean back a little bit, babe, so I can see you too.
Yeah.
All right. So let us know how we're coming through. And if you can hear us. Again, 7 signs your relationship may be in trouble. The first thing, a lot of times, again, we talked about last week that people, end up being blindsided, talked about a friend of mine or a lady that, she was married. And actually I talked about a movie that I had watched last week, and it was a lady, she was married, and actually it happened to a friend of mine as well, but she was married and she was dropping her daughter off at school, and they had been planning this 4-week European vacation, her and her husband, and she was so excited, dropped her daughter off at college, and started, to talk to her husband about this trip. And he goes, yeah, I'm not going on this trip with you. I'm going on this trip with somebody else. Wow. And she was like, wait, what? And she was so disturbed by that. She was so upset, about, him saying he was going on. He was like, I don't even love you anymore. I'm in love with this other lady. And she was like, what, our realtor? And it was just a terrible situation. So sometimes people are blindsided, but you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. You should always pay attention to your relationship. You should always pay attention to what's happening in your relationship. And you should never allow yourself to coast in your relationship. You should never allow yourself just to be like getting in a routine is not always bad. But when you're in a routine, make sure that you're watching, make sure that you're still engaging, make sure that you're checking. And it's okay to ask, are you okay? Are we okay? What's working, what's not working, what you feeling, what you not feeling. Are you upset with me? Are you feeling some type of way about me? It's okay to ask those questions. And then your spouse or your mate might be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm talking about us. Are we good?
Right, and that's a good thing. You should always be talking about us, especially when we're talking about couples that are in a relationship for marriage. Always talk about yourself. You should always be finding out what is going on, because nobody in a relationship can read minds. You have to be able to, on one end, be willing to open up and express your true feelings to your spouse. And then on the other end, you also need to be able to listen and be able to cater. I mean, you took vows in marriage saying for better, for worse.
Absolutely.
And that means that even if sometimes there are some relationship troubles and you're hitting a rough patch, it doesn't mean that it can't be solved. But if there is a lack of communication, there leaves opportunities for you to be blindsided.
Absolutely. And there is happiness available still for you. And still, even if you are in a rough patch in your relationship, if you're in a dry patch in your relationship, there is happiness that is available also to you. But you got to seek it out. You got to pray it out. You got to discuss it out. You got to really keep Christ in the center of that relationship. Sometimes people backslide, and people don't even use that word anymore. Oh, they in a backslidden state. Well, people still do backslide. They still fall out of grace. They still fall out of, I won't say fall out of grace, but they still fall out of their place in God sometimes. And you got to really make sure that you're watching, and really make sure that you're paying attention, whether or not people are following, or falling out of relationship with God even.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because if a person is falling out of relationship with God, your relationship between them is really, it's an open playing field for the enemy. So the first thing, like I said, is if there's ineffective communication.
Okay. Just keep going.
Okay, ineffective communication. So ineffective communication, that means that when you're trying to communicate with someone, you can close it AOL. I don't need that.
Keep talking. Keep talking,
Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry.
work on it.
Interfering with communication. If you're talking to your spouse and things are not, you're not able to really communicate, you're not able to really get what you need to get, you're not able to get the response that you need or the response that you're looking for. So if you're not getting that, if you're not getting that type of response in your communication is dead. That's a sign that there's an issue with your relationship. There's a sign that there's an issue with what is going on in your marriage or in your partnership, in your relationship.
That's very true. And you just have to be aware. You don't ever want to give opportunities for troubles to come into something and make something a much bigger issue. You know, and a lot of times you always see, especially in social media, on certain things that you'll see certain things going on that they only show half the picture, or they'll show all the good parts, but they don't show the bad parts or the rough parts. And you just have to realize there are going to be those times, but if you have the correct tools for conflict and problem resolution, then that'll help you navigate through the troubles that you may be having.
So absolutely. So you definitely want to watch it if you're having ineffective communication, or even if somebody's saying like they kind of don't care, or they're having a nonchalant attitude about what it is that you're trying to say. All right. The next thing would be you don't have active or healthy arguments. Again, that goes back into that not really caring. You're having an argument, but they don't even really, it's not even being productive. It's not even really a passionate argument. You're really not even trying to make your point. You just like whatever the other person says. It's just whatever. And if you're doing that, that's an issue. That's an issue. If you're acting like you don't care, if you're not really responding, that's an issue. Definitely.
Yeah. Say that one more time. Sorry, I was
No more active or healthy arguments. Not really caring about what's being said. And again, that's something that's an issue. You gotta definitely not be engaged even when you're arguing. You got to be engaged when you're arguing, and you got to be engaged when you are streaming.
Yeah, right.
You got to be engaged when you're streaming also.
Right. We had logged off of Facebook for a second, so I was trying to problem solve.
Yes, of course.
But it is important in any type of conflict resolution that you have to have open communication. And that means both being able to communicate your desires, but also being able to listen. A lot of times in relationships, people don't listen to their spouses. And when you don't listen to your spouse, it makes them feel unappreciated, makes them feel like they're not important in the relationship. And if you don't solve the problems, that those times of miscommunication can lead to something greater. And God has a desire for you to go through this partnership together and a journey, and it'd be wonderful. And even in bad times, there's been ups and downs in our relationships. We've had good and bad times, but at the end, we come out of it because God is in the center of it. So a lot of times, not having a good foundation can lead to cracks in your foundation because you're not having a good prayer life together, or you're not communicating together, and those cracks over time can cause something to crumble. So we're trying to give you, hopefully tonight, maybe some issues that if you are seeing these things in your relationship, that you can address them so that you won't have the troubles that can lead to a bad foundation in marriage.
Absolutely. And or if you spot these things, that you can go back and rebuild that foundation. You can go back and solidify, or you can reaffirm, you can rebuild. I have a group of investors that I work with. I'm a realtor by profession, and a lot of times, people go into houses and they're like, oh, well, this house is no good, or this kind of thing. But I have a group of investors that they don't think that any house is bad. It's just, what are you willing to repair? Because any house can be rebuilt or repaired. It's just what you're willing to repair. No matter how bad it is, any house can be fixed. I don't care if the foundation is cracked completely and the floor is unlevel and things are falling to one side. You can 100% repair that house. It's just, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to put in the work? Because it's gonna take some work and it's gonna cost you something. Are you willing to pay the price? So it is definitely possible. That kind of goes into the next one. If you stop seeing a future together with your spouse, if you stop seeing a future together, that's an issue.
Right.
That's an issue, because if you're thinking about your future and you're not thinking about your spouse in that future, that's a sign that your relationship is probably in trouble, right. And you need to really address that.
The Bible says, write the vision and make it plain. And I remember we actually, my wife has done vision boards and before, and we were at, I think, Steve Harvey one time, and he was talking about how successful people actually have vision boards. They're constantly changing, but it's basically still lines up. Even the world has it where it lines up with godly principles, meaning that you should be having goals for your relationship, for your marriage. And because you are evolving, your marriage is always evolving.
Yes.
So if you sit down and write or visions for your marriage and you don't have your spouse included, you need to go back and adjust your vision, because together you guys should have a common goal. A lot of times people have issues where they have discussions or arguments or problems over children, over relationships, over sex, over money, over house duties, over all these things, and it's because their vision as a couple is different. And as your vision as a couple is different, you're going to start going different ways. And I reference a triangle all the time. You should be climbing up both ways on a triangle, both angles, going to make the tip for a lifelong journey with God as a foundation at the bottom. And if you vision that, if you go opposite ways, you actually make a Y. And you'd be like, well, why is nothing working in my relationship?
Right.
Because you're going opposite ways.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have a vision.
Yeah. And you want to have a vision, because the Bible says without a vision, the people perish. If you don't have a vision in your relationship, if you don't have a vision for your marriage, you will perish. Your relationship is going to perish. It's not going to prosper. It's not going to grow the way that you want it to grow. And it's not in all of this changing people and changing person, because guess what? You take you into that next relationship. You take you and all of your baggage into the next relationship. Right. So, it's not always in changing spouses. And I mean, granted, sometimes because you're at an impasse, things don't work out. But if both people are willing, things can work out. And if both people are willing to change and willing to allow God to be a part of it, then those things definitely can work out.
And God is faithful. So
absolutely.
It sort of has to do with, and your analogy is that it is very important to see what you're willing to put in to fix that relationship, because after the hard work, it is beautiful. It is wonderful. It's worth it. And a lot of times, especially in this society, we are so quick to have things without working for them, or so quick to not put in the work to see the beauty of what it is. God says that he'll give you beauty for ashes. Even if you're in an ashy relationship, even right now, if you're having ashes because of issues, there is a beauty that comes from it if you're willing to, one, trust God, and two, put in the work.
Absolutely. That's 100%. That's really beautiful, because he really will give you beauty for ashes. Again, you don't want to live separate lives, and you don't want to well, that actually is the fourth thing, living separate lives. We were talking about stop seeing a future together, but if you start living a separate life, you do everything that you enjoy outside. Hey there, you enjoy outside of that relationship, and that's not cool. And that's a sign that there's an issue. If all your best times are without your spouse, whenever my husband is at home, I don't care if he got on my nerves, but whenever he's in town, whenever he's at home, Yeah, you never get on my nerves. You never get on my. He never gets on my nerves. Never gets on my nerves. But anyways, whenever he's here, I don't want to hang out with nobody else. I don't want to hang out with anybody else. I get invited to go do all of these other things, and I'm like, I don't want to go if he's not going. I don't want to be there if he's not there. And that's like, I'm like, am I super sad that I don't even want to be anywhere without this fella? Maybe I am, but that's how I feel. And you should not feel like, I mean, I don't feel bad if you want to do some things and you have a girls' night or a guys' night. But if it's a pattern and everything that you enjoy is not with your spouse, that's an issue.
The number one way to having trouble in your relationship is to be isolated. Because when you're isolated, that is where the enemy can do his work. That's where he's going to speak to you. He's going to tell you that nobody cares, nobody understands you, your needs are not being fulfilled. He's going to put all those thoughts in your mind. So when you are unable to communicate effectively in your relationship, that leads to the enemy being able to isolate you. And one thing about protecting your marriage and coming out of trouble is to know how, if you're a fighter, know how your opponent's going to fight. You need to know how, if you're strategist and you're playing chess, how the other person is thinking. So you need to know what tricks the enemy will use or what situations will come up that'll cause you to have trouble. So one thing that you can do, and men are sometimes really prone to do this, is that they shut down and don't communicate. And when you stop communicate, it's going to lead to isolation. So even if you have to have a difficult talk, even if you are prone to not having wanting to have conflict, you need to have conflict resolution and be able to communicate so that you aren't going separate. Because if you start going separate, you're starting to break that triangle and you're going to grow apart.
Absolutely. And that is so well said. You really do need to have the hard conversations. You have to have the hard conversations. With men, a lot of times they don't want to have that hard conversation. Women, we want to talk through things. We want to, express ourselves. But men don't want to have hard conversations. And sometimes women don't either. Don't want to have that hard talk. You don't want to bring it up. But you have to get it talked about. You got to get it talked through. You got to communicate. You got to have that hard conversation so that you can get past whatever it is that's bothering you, because it's not just going to go away. Right. It's not just going to be like, oh, it just one day got better. It is still there. And one thing you're going to do is, like, we used to have a cat when I was younger, and the cat was named Kitty. Cat was named Kitty, actually, believe it or not. And Kitty had an injured paw. And Kitty would walk around, she would walk real soft on that paw, but, she still would walk on it. But when there was one time when I ended up, I don't know if I kind of stepped on it or I brushed against it or something, but when I say Kitty went berserk on me and went ham on me with that claw, that is the same thing, right? Hello, Kitty. That's the same thing that is going to happen to you with your spouse. They're going to do something that's going to step on that tender area in your heart or in your emotions or in your feelings, and you're going to snap. And then it's going to be a whole big old thing, and you're going to be like, wait, what happened? Well, that's because you didn't deal with it during the time that you should have dealt with it, and you did not have that hard conversation, and you did not talk about that part, whatever it was that was painful or an issue for you.
That's good.
So,
and don't ignore it. Like, you saw that the cat had issues.
Exactly. You just
and
ignore it.
And you just ignored it or thought that it would go away.
Yeah.
You have to fight for what you love. Whatever is important takes hard work.
It does.
And it's worth it in the end. It's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. And the next thing is little or no physical affection or sex. That is a big no-no. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just a big no-no. God did not have to give us the gift of sex within our marriage. He didn't have to give us that gift. He could have been like, the guy come up and pat you on the back, you're pregnant, there you go. You know what I'm saying? Or sneeze on you. It could have been anything. He did not have to give us that intimacy. He did not have to give us that act. And to withhold that is, the Bible says, render unto your spouse due benevolence. That due benevolence, that due love, that's due benevolence. You got to be able to come together and communicate and to be intimate in that way. To hold back that as a punishment or as I don't feel like being with you, or just like, oh, I don't feel like I'm too tired. You need to get your life get yourself together. You got some kind of physical ailment, then you need to go to the doctor. It's a small part of marriage, but it's an extremely important part of marriage, especially for men. A very important part of marriage, and you really need to make sure that you are connecting. And if for some reason one or the other is not connecting in that way, or not interested in being involved like that, then that's a possibility of a problem.
Right. And then, like we've discussed, and I think number 10 or 11, there's a appropriate way to have appropriate intimacy in a relationship. You have to know the love language of your spouse, what they speak, what they like, what they need to receive. And so the physical part is important, but the intimate part is important too. And then, you got married because you liked this person. There were certain physical aspects that you liked about them.
Yeah.
And then as people evolve and as times changes and babies happen and work happens and life happens, and things may change. But the person on the inside is still that same person, and you have to be able to cater to that person.
Yeah.
You have to be able to connect to the intimate part, because if you connect spiritually, if you connect with the mind, you connect intimately with the heart, then the physical part is going to be easy. And things change. Sometimes what you could do at 20, you can't do at 40. What you could do at 30, you can't do at 50. So it's always a constant adjustment.
Yeah.
But to totally take that part out of your relationship is going to bring trouble into your relationship.
Absolutely. Yep, that's very well said. Very well said. The next thing is, if you're feeling insecure in your relationship, that's the issue. If your spouse got you feeling some type of way, you feeling insecure, you don't feel like you're solid, chances are you're probably not solid. You're probably not solid. And if you're not solid, you need to really, really, really have that conversation. You need to have a conversation with your spouse and find out why the insecurity is there.
Yeah, because it's still about building bridges.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times when we talk about, or you've heard the saying, well, marriage is 50-50. Marriage is 100-100, because
Absolutely.
each is two whole people coming together.
Yeah.
And when you have insecurities, is normally not. It can be because if your spouse makes you feel a certain way about certain things, that can make you insecure. But there also could be some issues that you have with yourself. And then if you aren't able to fix yourself first to make yourself whole in your own relationship, it's hard to come together with your spouse to make your relationship whole together. And then in going back to it, you also have to make sure that you don't sow into insecurities that you create.
Yeah.
If there are certain, sometimes people have pet peeves or certain things, you can't let something that you don't like, maybe that your spouse does or does not do, affect your relationship to where it makes them feel uncomfortable, where it makes them feel insecure, because that means you're not having that conversation in the right way to relay your feelings, because your feelings and stuff are important. But when you possess, or you make a statement to make your spouse feel insecure, then you're not doing what is biblically sound, especially for a man. A man is supposed to cover his wife.
Absolutely.
And a woman can make a man feel insecure by not respecting him.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to make sure that you walk in those areas with love and with wisdom.
Absolutely. Like the Bible says, edifying one another. You got to build up each other. You got to make, and if your spouse is saying, okay, I'm feeling insecure, if your spouse is saying that there is things that are just not, I'm not feeling good about us. I'm not feeling like, I feel like you might be disconnected or whatever. If your spouse is saying that, and it's your responsibility to help them feel secure. It's your responsibility to help them feel connected. It's your responsibility to help them feel like they're loved. It's your responsibility. Certainly if a person is going to God and they're feeling fulfilled in the presence of God, and God is speaking to them about who they are, then they're fulfilled within themselves. But as far as their relationship and the way that you treat them and the way that you engage with them, you have to work
Right.
to make sure that person is feeling. And now sometimes people just gonna be whatever, and you feel like you're doing everything you can do, and they're still gonna feel that way. Well, that just continue to pray and continue to reassure until that person gets to where they need to be. And that might be a lifelong journey, but that's what marriage is all about. Better or worse, richer, poor, sickness, health, death do us part. Those are your vows. It's better not to make the vow than not to keep it.
That's true. And if you're just joining in, or if we're almost actually finished this evening, but we're talking about relationship troubles, 7 signs, and then also how to effectively get through those troubles. So we're actually on number 6, right?
We're actually on number 7. Number
So
7.
We're almost wrapping up. And
Yep.
number 7 is?
You don't feel connected to each other. That is a bad thing. If you're not feeling connected, and again, all of these kind of segue into each other. But if you're not feeling connected to your spouse, like you just kind of going through the motions, that's a sign that there might be an issue brewing in your relationship. There's an issue brewing in your relationship if you are not if you're not feeling connected to your spouse.
Right. And that happens. I mean,
It does.
It happens. It's part of a marriage. It's part of relationships. And well, what's the solution? How do you bring back that connection? Well, once again, like we said, it takes effort. It takes work. You have got to, if you're in a funk, you've got to get out of that funk. You've got to shake it off. And a lot of times, especially for men, a lot of times the weight of the world, the issues outside of the home can bring a disconnection in the home. So one thing that I've always done, or one thing that I do to make sure that it doesn't affect my marriage, is whatever that happens outside the home, when I walk into those doors, I shake off. I leave it out there so that I can concentrate on my family, my wife, my children, all the issues that happen inside the home. And so a lot of times for men, you got to not bring outside inside.
Yeah.
We were in Japan a few weeks ago, and they have an outside inside culture. They take their shoes off. What they do outside, they don't necessarily do inside. And that's really a good principle to live by in marriage. Whatever's outside your marriage, you keep that outside, because when you're home, whatever happens inside is where you need to concentrate on.
Absolutely. I love that outside inside culture, having that outside inside culture. And you need to have an outside inside culture in your relationship. What is outside, what happens outside of your relationship, outside of your home, leave it outside. Sometimes it's even people. Sometimes even people that are a part of your family that are not doing your relationship good. Have an outside inside culture. You're outside, but inside, let me tell you, and I told somebody today, I said, listen, God has given me a commission to my husband and to my children, and to be stewards over that first. That's what he told me to monitor and to love and to build and to protect first before anything else, my job, before my positions, at church or whatever. My family is what God is going to ask me about first. And it's really important that they have lives that are blessed and that are hidden in Christ, that they feel loved, that they feel supported, that they feel undergirded, and all of those other things that you can feel and support. It's important because God gave me commission over that, and also over those other things, but those things are primary. In the Proverbs 31 woman, it says, it didn't say all about, all of these other things, but it says about what, her husband is known in the gates, that her children will rise up and call her blessed. She was a businesswoman. She did all of these things, but she made sure that her home was taken care of. She was spinning purple and scarlet and whatever the colors were by night. She was doing things that needed to happen to make sure that her house was together. And sometimes, because we don't have that inside outside culture, we do not do those things to build up our house. If you don't build up your house, if you get on the defensive, if something is broken and you don't get in there and try to pray it through and fix it and love it through, that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a problem, and maybe the demise of your relationship.
Right. And don't let service to anything else. Your first service and honor is to God.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we believe. And because of that, if you honor Him, then everything else. The Bible says, "In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy path." Even in your marriage, if you give God His first due, His first praise, if you ask him, how do I speak to my wife? How do I love my children? How do I discipline my children? How do I manage my marriage? He's going to honor his word and give you everything that you need to be successful.
Yep.
So a lot of times, especially when you're looking at trying to connect to one another, some people that don't want to connect, they look for excuses to do all the other things. And then even in a Christian or believing household, that's out of the will of God, because your first concern is to your spouse, is to your family after Christ. And so it doesn't mean that you can't serve, but if your husband, saved or unsaved, if you are at church 90% of the time and your husband said, I need you home,
You better go home.
you better come on home.
You better go home.
If your wife says that you are doing too much right now, regardless of if their motive is different, or even if there's, you need to go and honor the request of your spouse.
Absolutely.
And then, the God will deal with their heart.
Absolutely.
But you have to do your due service in maintaining your marriage so that you don't disconnect. Because once you disconnect, it's hard to reconnect. But it takes that power, it takes that discipline to get back, because like you said, building on a foundation or building something that has to be reconstructed is hard work. So to not you're going to have to work hard, but to not have to overwork, make sure that you are looking at these signs and making sure that you are giving input and adjusting and always changing, always reevaluating marriage. It's daily change. The person that you were last month is different than the person you are right now.
Absolutely.
Last year, totally different. 5 years from now.
Yep.
And the longer your marriage is, the more that you need to evolve.
Absolutely. And you need to make sure that you're connecting about those changes. We posted something that Kirk Franklin's wife, she posted, and she talked about how they've been married for over 20 years as well. And she just shared how her and her husband talk to each other. Sometimes they go have coffee or whatever it is and talk about where they are in their relationship, what's working, what's not working, what needs to change, because you are not the same person that you were when you first got married. I don't care if you just got married a year ago. I don't care if you just got married 6 months ago. You are different. You're 6 months different than you were 6 months ago when you got married. So especially if you're 10 years into it, or if you're 15 years into it, or if you're 20 years into it, you hear this all the time. People saying, we're growing apart. Yeah, because you're not growing together. You're not talking about which way you're going. You're not continually communicating your plans with one another. And so you're saying that you're growing apart. You allowed yourself to grow apart, but you can always train that tree to go back the way that it should. Just like when you new trees, a lot of times you'll see rope tied around the tree to train it to grow the way that it should. You got to put some spiritual rope around it and train that relationship to grow the way that it should, so that you guys can still be grown like that bamboo that's intertwined, that you grow together and that you keep growing up, but growing up together.
That's right. And when things start to go right and you start to drift away, you need to trim. You need to cut off some of the things that may be causing you to go different ways.
Absolutely. So, prune it back.
Yep. Give it a prune. So, hey, we hope that you've enjoyed our topic tonight. Hopefully that Facebook, we are still trying to do some other things. Hopefully that Facebook went well. Thank you for following us on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to head out for the evening, but continue to share, continue to tell somebody about this if you like it, and continue to DM. We love getting the topics and hearing from you.
Yep.
So we should see you next Monday, hopefully 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we're trying to get better and better. So you all keep us in your prayers, but we want to keep sharing. If we're helping you or inspiring you in any kind of way to have a better relationship and to live your best marriage, to live your best life, to live your best family, then we're happy to be able to do that. And of course, if you have any questions, if you need us to pray with you, we're always praying for you. Every couple that is here, every person, every individual, every single person, we are praying for you sincerely and genuinely praying for you. And we know God has great things in your future and a great happy heart for you, and he has an amazing happy marriage for you, if that's what you so desire. Or if you're in a marriage, that's what he desires for you to be elated about the person that you're with for your life partner.
All right, it's been Love in 60 Seconds. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Well, guys, we have to wrap it up this evening. We really hope that you've enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, this conversation has been amazing, and we want you to tune in again next time so that we can discuss more of these amazing topics and these topics of interest. Then don't forget to DM us, contact us, reach out to us, and we will definitely respond back.
Yep, this has been Love in 60 Seconds. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
All right. Good night, everybody.
60